Have you ever asked yourself what the things around you are made of? Like stones, the wood on your desk, or even you as a person? Or perhaps you've cut certain things around you into tiny pieces just to see what they are made up of. If so, you are in good company. For a very long time, men have pondered what matter was made of. The idea that matter was made up of very small, indivisible particles called atoms dates back to the Greek philosopher Leucippus and his student Democritus in about 440 BC. Their basic idea was this: given any piece of substance, that substance can be cut into smaller and smaller bits until we obtain the smallest bit of that substance, which cannot be divided further. In other words, all matter is made up of atoms, and at the smallest scales, between separate bits of matter, there are spaces that contain no matter. Now, about 100 years later, Aristotle proposed his own atomic theory, where he taught that all space is filled with matter. There are no empty spaces. So who do you think was right? We will settle this debate by following scientific evidence. Now remember that both Aristotle and Democritus had no concrete evidence for or against their theories. They were just speculating. The first experimental evidence that we have in favor of particulate nature of matter is what is called Brownian motion. Now, Brownian motion is the random motion of particles suspended in a fluid resulting from their collision with fast-moving molecules in the fluid. This phenomenon was first described by the Scottish botanist Robert Brown. Now, while looking through a microscope at pollen grains suspended in water, he noticed that the tiny pollen grains moved about in zigzag paths, even though the water appeared to be perfectly still. This pointed to the fact that there were tiny particles moving around at all times in a rapid state of motion, and hence pushing these pollen grains around. Another piece of evidence in support of particulate nature of matter came from chemical reactions. It was observed that whenever elements combine to form a compound, they always do so in the same proportions by weight. For example, carbon dioxide gas is always composed of one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. This is known as the law of definite proportions. Now, a third bit of evidence in favor of particulate nature of matter is the process of diffusion. If you place a few drops of bromine at the bottom of a glass jar and cover the jar, after a while, the bromine vapor will be seen in the upper part of the jar. This is despite the fact that bromine gas is denser than air. Bromine vapor is brown in color, so this process is quite obvious and easy to observe. Now, if you throw a stone in a pond of water, it sinks because it's denser, right? Since the denser bromine gas does not remain at the bottom of the jar, it suggests to us that bromine gas is made up of tiny particles that can move about easily. And therefore, we can say that matter is made up of tiny particles that are free to move around with spaces in between them. And this is what is known as the particulate nature of matter. However, note that these pieces of evidence are indirect, as there are no ways to observe these particles directly, even with the help of the most powerful microscope. This means that Democritus was probably right. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson where we shall discuss the atom. Bye for now.